Hello and welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino, and today we have a special show. It's going to be the first of our YouTube channel, and what better topic to talk about on that show, on that YouTube channel, than video? So I have with me two of my buddies. I have Mr. DJ Falk, who is the executive producer of Network Frequency and Netfreak TV, both things I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about, and also Kevin Webb, who is the senior vice president of sales for Frankly Media. So we're going to do this a little different. Most of the times when people talk video, they talk about the creation side or the monetization side. Those things always conflict with each other and never align. So we're going to talk about it all at the same time. I don't think either knew this was going to happen, which makes it super funny for me, which is always the best part. And I think it's going to be a real eye-opening thing for people who think about creating content, distributing content, and how you make money doing so. You could have the best idea in the world. I think one of the things we've learned about the internet revolution, you could have the best website, best idea, flashiest design in the world. If you're not playing the SEO game and you don't know Google's tricks and tactics, none of that is going to matter. So that's what we're going to get into here. So let's get started. Let's introduce. Let's start with Kevin. So again, Mr. Kevin Webb. Kev, talk us a little bit about how you got to where you are now and what you do day to day at Frankly.
Sure, Nick. So I got into the internet ad business by mistake. It was a lead that I was given working for a company in New York City, a company called Total New York. And it was a webzine, and basically was told that they were looking for someone that knew something about HTML and sports and something to do with tech.
Age yourself. Talk about when that was.
So that was kind of late 90s.
I was going to say, when you say HTML is the first thing you throw out there. Like,
yeah, that was late 90s. And so went on this job interview and told them why I was there and, HTML and sports. And they said they really wanted nothing about that, but how about you do PR for us? And so took the job. First phone call I made was to MTV, and I was explaining who we were about. And it was we called ourselves a webzine. My last name being Webb, and the fact there was www.totalnewyork.com. Got on the phone with somebody from MTV and said, "This is Kevin Webb calling from Total New York. We're a webzine. www." The person on the phone said, "www. What?" And that didn't go very well, but ultimately ended up getting immersed into the ever-changing business models of online tech and advertising, and spent the first half of my career building the actual ad servers, ad tech, and the ways to target users based on their behaviors, etc. Second half of my career, creating that ad inventory, have been focused on selling it. So people, I think the best way to position myself is I'm an ad tech nerd that slings online digital ads.
yeah, and that's a great way to put it because that makes it simplify because it's a lot more complicated than that. And I will tell you, I think this is the first time I've ever actually mentioned this on the show. Right around 2005-ish, I was actually working in San Diego at a company called Divx, which pretty much built the back end of how you watch videos streaming on the internet. And just so everybody knows, let's get it out of the way. The only reason that standards in video are applied is by how you watch porn. So it was when back in the day when it was between DVD and the other platforms, it was actually whichever one the porn industry chooses is where people actually go with. That is not me being dirty. That is an actual fact. That was between beta and VHS. Every time there was a competition between which video format, it was the one that the pornography industry chose, which is the way they went. So that's a little tidbit for you guys out there. But I also was doing a lot of the FireClick ads, and FireClick was the initial form of the video tracking, of the web tracking. So I got some experience there too, which is the same. So DJ, how about you? Your day-to-day is probably a little different, and how you got there is probably a little different, a little bit more creative, but why don't you give your rundown?
Man, thanks for having me on today. And sorry about talking a little low and everything. I just got a little problem with my mouth today from surgery, but overall, yeah, man, I very lucky to have been in Atlanta at the time that I was. Went to high school, college here, played baseball, was very active. I was lucky enough that when I was in high school, my school had a full studio. We had, we were doing the weekly news, all that kind of stuff. I did everything I could to get out of class, which included, playing baseball, but also then going to record all the other practices and then video broadcasts. And so at the time I was learning.
Which is ironic because that was school, right?
Yeah.
You were actually learning skills for later in life. So you're sitting there like the punk, like, oh, I'm just trying to get out of school. It's like, no, dummy, you're in school. This is what you're learning to do for the rest of your life. Yeah. So it's funny how that works.
It really was because like my mom's an event planner. She's done it since I was born. I literally had a crib in her offices, wherever the event was at the time. And so tying those together, when I left, I was trying to figure out, like, college is great right now. Music industry was great, 2000s, all that kind of stuff. I was lucky enough that I decided to quit playing baseball and stop hurting myself. So I went to a fraternity rush party and met Nappy Roots and
There you
met
go.
those guys. And
I feel like a lot of people have that kind of story with the Nappy Roots.
those
Like, no,
guys-
dude, I was just out and I met him. And I was like, okay.
And that's really how it is. Those guys are the nicest guys in entertainment. They truly love what they do, and they were a good example of, hey, you can do anything you want to do in entertainment as long as you work hard doing it. They had one or two good albums initially, and then they went silent for a little bit. But the one thing I noticed about them and how I actually got involved was through booking them and helping them and going to college campuses and all that kind of stuff. And then we went to a studio, and I was there for about 3 or 4 years working in. It's one here in Atlanta called Tree Sound.
It's amazing.
It's a great
And it's one I think
studio.
everyone knows about. That's one of those studios that, like, even it made its way to my end of the world and freaking radio, and I know that. So that's how you know that people know.
Yeah, and Paul Diaz is great over there, and I was lucky enough that the whole team was awesome, and they kind of facilitated me into working in entertainment in a way that I wasn't an artist, I wasn't talent.
Right.
And there's a lot of people out there in the content creation world that don't want to be talent and that don't want to do that.
I mean, that's 90% of the industry, I have to imagine.
exactly right.
And I mean, that's why when you watch a movie, the credits are so long. And I mean, I don't know the last time anyone watched a movie other than a Marvel movie when they're trying to get to the end credit
See
scene.
the end credits.
But I mean, there are so many people involved. Even TV commercials, there are so many people involved. I mean, and they all get their fair shot for a reason.
Yeah, and that very much was, when leaving the music industry after 3 or 4 years of being there, working with a lot of the record labels, they were trying to figure out, well, how do we sell music now? Nobody's
Yeah.
buying CDs. There's no
Yeah. Oh
mechanical
my God.
royalties
And I was one of those
anymore.
people on Napster in '98. And
Yeah.
like I was the one burning, downloading songs, burning CDs, and selling them to people. And again, speaking of it again, a lot of it was porn too. I mean, let's just call it what it is. When you learned how to burn it to CD, it was that easy. And again, the diversity of backgrounds, right? You came on from the business side, came up through it that way. You came up by a chance encounter because you were trying to get out of school. Which, if you had to guess which one would be the technical one and which one would be the creative one, you could probably guess the way that is laid out. So let's start with something that we're going to bring this back to. A lot of people want to get in the content game. I mean, every piece of advice you read is just make content, just make content. And as someone who runs this show and is trying to organize and produce this show, I understand it can be daunting to create content. One, just do people care? Are people watching? Why are you making it? So let's throw it all out the window. Let's throw that all out the window. Let's give advice to people who want to get into content. What would you say is something you wish you knew a little earlier before you were creating, and something you say you wish you knew a little earlier before you were monetizing? What advice can you give someone?
For me, it's just get out and do it. Like, now everybody is a photographer, everybody is a videographer. Like, everybody wants to be, shooting and telling a story and sharing it. And I think that technology has enabled that very much so, more than ever. So I think that if you want to, do it. If you don't have the budget for a good camera, a good film, so use your phone. You shoot it, do it, get it done, take it somewhere, and then find people that are better than you and make it look better.
And be around people to make you better. And I think we talked about this, DJ. When I worked in film production in the 90s, I mean, an Avid machine was $4,000 or $5,000, which you needed to do the editing. I mean, your phone can do more now than the full apparatus back in a whole studio can do in the late 90s. Like, that's without exaggeration. So like you said, shoot it. The quality is the least of your worries in the beginning. It's reps. You got to get to practice. So that's that side. So now let's go to the other side. What about these people who have these grand dreams of making $1 million with their content? What advice would you give them when they start out?
Yeah, I think, Nick, it's really probably the biggest challenge is, you build it, they will come. The field of dreams, and it's the right mix of the destination for the content, but then also the right mix of using the content to draw the audience in. And so your question about, like, what would I wish I had applied in the past, it's really using content to really drive that audience, because while content is there for monetization, it's also there to draw eyeballs and grow audience.
Yeah, and that's that connection, right? Like, you can't have one without the other. You're not going to make money without the audience. But at the same time, to be fair, the more niche your audience is, the more the opportunity for money exists. Because if you're selling $50 million yachts, you don't need to sell 25,000 of them. You sell one mega yacht and you're done. So who cares how many listeners? But at the same time, you have to build that following and build the trust with that audience to be able to sell them that content. But you have to be able to. There has to be strategy involved if you want to monetize it. Which brings up a good point. You you don't always have to do things to monetize it. Most people who do a podcast who have a half of a brain realize that they're not making money off doing it. And of course, that's what we hear, those grand stories about Rogan and Freakonomics and stuff you should know. But really, you should do it to peddle influence, because just by getting up on a microphone and saying what you believe and talking through it, eventually you get some sort of influence over people, and influence leads to sales, leads to all these things. So I think after the break, we're going to go dig a little deeper. My only advice is, again, now that I've done this for a couple episodes, is one, don't take yourself too seriously. Two, don't expect to be good till you've done it 200 times, which means that's a lot less pressure on yourself. Because if you go and F it up on time 1 through 200, you're like, I planned it to be that way. And then what happens is you eventually actually get good at it because you've practiced it so many times, just like anything, and it's that repetition. And just remember, how many times does it take to be great at something? Thousands. So don't get mad if no one listens to your podcast. Don't get mad if no one likes your video content. You just have to get better. And if you get better at it, the audience will come. You are listening to the Marketing Madmen, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Continue our conversation here with DJ Falk and Kevin Webb. And DJ, let me ask you about content, about duration, because this is a hot topic right now. And if you look, our attention spans have gotten shorter. You look at from just back in the day from, watching movies and how long the scenes were versus now where it's like a quick cut every second, everything's got to move. And you just look at our attention spans and TikTok, we've seen the duration of our attention spans follow the duration of video. Short form video is in. So talk about, from a creation side, talk about short form versus long form, why our attentions got there and how it's different from each other.
I think overall, the main difference is really what you're doing it for. At the end of the day, the long form story, like, you can get a long story out really short. Highlights, all that kind of stuff, the highlight reel, recaps, those kind of things, like, those exist for a reason. People love seeing themselves on a video afterwards, all that kind of stuff. So that's what, with our corporate clients, we do a lot, is the event recaps.
Sure. But now, that being said, those are meant to be on 200 eyeballs.
Yep.
With a purpose and there's a reason that they're creating those corporate imaging pieces. The reason they're putting that out, there's an agenda behind it,
Yep.
right? So that's a different audience than potentially something mass audience.
It's long form, and I think that's exactly it. Is like, what is it for? Most of the time, the short form stuff is very much to hook and switch. You want to go ahead and get them in, interested at least. And like you said about the influence part, I think that's where, like, it was funny about all these folks becoming influencers and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't really much to me ever about necessarily the influence of it, but more about the storytelling and the mechanism behind that. And so, like, you can do it in a short form. That is very, very, very possible, and there's a lot of good platforms for it. TikTok and all these folks that have taken over on that. And what's funny is you're going to even see them doing things about switching into long form, because there is such a need for that. People love podcasts. People love the long form. But I think ultimately the difference comes down to what it's used for. And that's why now everybody, you have to truly be interested to sit down and listen to something. And so, like, if you can pique that interest through short form, then it leads to the long form.
Yeah, and I've always been told, and it's just a funny thing, that you age into certain things, right? Like, I'm like, who would listen to somebody talk about sports in which they were watching last night? And like, no, you don't understand, you age into it. And then as I get older, and I'm like, I get it, it's like time is used differently. Like, you spend all this time at work putting out fires. Do you really need to watch a 30-second clip that's just running around? So I think it depends who your target audience is, but I also think you have to expect people to age. Just because you grab their attention, what are you doing to keep it? And that's one of the problems with the influencer generation, if you will. You're just a flash in the pan because they're going to be influenced by the next quick thing. Very few of those people build long-term brands. Now, we're also built to have immediate gratification, and there is a mechanism in social media to sell quickly. But if you want to build long-term branding, long-term video, and established content that is peddling influence is much more important, I would say. Also, Kevin, it's much more important to monetization. So if you're doing short form video to grab someone's attention, it's great. But if you put a 60-second commercial before a 30-second video, you screwed. Nobody's watching that. If they don't have the attention span to watch a full video, how are they watching a 60-second commercial? So talk about the monetization side and why short form should be led to longer form or vice versa to help monetize.
Yeah, I think, what DJ said, about, like, what's your purpose? A short form, I think, there's a opportunity or a reason for short form for monetization. But to your point, Nick, when it comes to what we call the playlist, you certainly don't want to inundate a user with too many ads and short pieces of content, especially with online video. you want to separate that out. So maybe you have one ads slot and then 3 or 4 pieces of content. But ultimately, it really I think a lot of it comes down to the audience that you're communicating to, the device, the environment. So in places in short form content, I typically refer to as snackable content versus long form, where you're leaning back and really consuming the content and really just literally leaning back.
And the same company can use both to their advantage. I mean, it
100%.
doesn't have to be exclusively to one or the other. I bet you there are plenty of old established companies. I think of like Bridgestone and like these commodity companies that are all of a sudden scrambling to find agencies to do short form content.
Yeah.
Usually because their kid is of age where they're like, Dad, I can't believe you don't do or Mom, you don't do short term content. And they're like, oh, we got to get to this TikTok thing. So I know it happens. I am curious. Let's talk technically. So, most of these video units are measured in CPMs. That's the advertising. Cost per 1,000 impressions. So much more goes into it, from engagement rate to click through. But let's keep it simple. Are the CPMs different for a short form video spot versus a long form? I have to imagine the spot durations are a little different. So talk technically about how the ad units are different from short form and long form.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what the what the content is, what environment, like what platform, and when I say platform, I mean CTV versus online video versus a mobile device. And I think when it gets into long form content, a lot of times you're getting into sponsorship elements and things like that. So
product placement that works better in long form because it's too obvious in short form.
Right. So I think that it really what's called the pre-roll versus the mid-roll. In terms of whether you're in short form and mid rolls for long form, it has to do with the really the ownership of that ad slot.
Yeah.
And if you're rotating several ads within what in terms of, if you want to get techie, what's called a pod, the value of that ad might go down. But if you have complete ownership, where you're running maybe a 90-second ad, 90-second ad. The value, of course, increases. It's all about really the share of voice and the eyeballs that you're in front of for whatever duration of time.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and that's a good point. So let's talk a little bit about just the data that goes into all this. So I've seen graphics before that are trying to show, when you follow the path of supply or demand side buying, how many people have their hands on it, how many places it touches, from the supply side to the demand side, to finally to the actual creator, to his video, to the clearinghouse in the middle, to the data source who tries to create the cohorts. And I mean, it was in the hundreds. So first of all, how the hell is anyone making any money?
Yeah.
Second of all, just if you will, without going over people's heads, talk about just how big the industry is and how many moving parts, and how amazing it is that you can fill an ad in a video within a half a second in real time, that all that could happen.
Yeah. So what you're referring to in terms of the hundreds of companies, what's really used and presented in meetings and to help people understand what's going on in the chaos, it's called the Lumascape. And that really
go ahead and say that again.
The Lumascape.
You better put a nice graphic over that, because the Lumascape, that's my first time. We've coined. Hopefully he coined that phrase and he patented it, because I haven't heard that one before. The Lumascape.
No, it's used throughout the industry because it is that complex, and especially for someone that's new, or you're really trying to explain people what the ad tax is about. It's from the agency, the buyer, all down to the publisher, or the person that's delivering the ad adjacent to their content. And the ad industry over the years has screwed up enough where there's measurement around engagement, there's measurement around fraud, viewability. So Nick, to your point, the more transparent you can be to the advertiser and show that there's real meaning behind high engagement, that sticky content, that's obviously where you're going to be able to drive the value of your content and audience up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fly by night content that's slung out there that really doesn't have a lot of value, and and that's when, kind of to your question before, that's when CPMs diminish and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of value there.
And I'm curious, and I was trying to throw air quotes up while you were saying transparent, because one of the things I've come to learn, again, for those that don't know, my radio charter is one of the most complicated things you'll ever see in your life. We have an obligation to the community, we have an EEO obligation, we have FCC affidavits that we have to fill out. This is a 100-year-old industry with bureaucracy. Let's call it what it is, right? It's not helpful to anyone. It's just because there are people that have jobs that need to keep their jobs, so it's checking off the boxes. There's none of that on the internet. You say transparent, but you can lie, and then the person looking over you, you could just pay them off to lie. There's no government regulation. There's nothing that says this XYZ is happening or is clear and is a standard practice.
Well, there's some does exist. There's
Okay.
there's MRC accreditation, where there's real practice put into the measurement and how engagement is actually
And that is that
tracked.
relatively standard, or people just throw that one around and then use another governing body?
No,
Because
it's-
you've all seen like the diamond certifications. Like, yeah, there's one, but there's 400 of them. It's just we
Right.
trust this one more. So is that a completely industry-wide accreditation, or is that one that the best ones kind of use?
There are services and platforms that are used like Double Verify, IAS, and so these are used, or basically what ends up becoming a currency. So right, this it's what the value of the media is actually traded on. While there is the impression, it's the gold standard, to your point of like, we've validated and have measured the fact that this user has watched this video or this piece of content, and it's been verified. And there something to kind of back to the currency. A lot of online ads are sold on demographics, and there are a bunch of different measurement
Sure.
systems that actually like ComScore, Nielsen, that and
Sure, but that's a language people understand, right? That's
Right.
been in radio and media forever. So that's a language. It's more the effective CPMs and the visible CPMs. And I think one of the really good points here, and that one thing I always try to share, if you have good content, a good message, and a good brand, all of that stuff's less important, right?
Yep.
DJ, if you make sticky good content, then who the hell cares what governing body is saying it's effective? If it's sticky good content and the ad fits on brand, people are going to buy stuff and watch it. And ultimately, one of my biggest problems with the digital industry is like, who cares how many fake metrics you make up? Are people buying the good in which I'm selling?
Yeah.
Because that's how I measure ROI. You don't know how many emails I get all the time, like guaranteeing 400% ROI. Wait a second. So you're telling me you can make my $14 million company a $60 million company? Go on, never hear back from the person. Because ROI, they're making up their own terms of return on investment. So DJ, talk about, because again, this is the back end. This is the unsexy stuff. Talk about when you're shooting content and when you're making content, why it's so important to put good content out there, not rush, because ultimately, whether you're using it internally or for advertising, bad content is bad content. And you could have every metric set up to watch it succeed. It will not garner engagement or support. So talk about it from the other side. When you go to make content, how you make good content.
I guess it doesn't matter anymore when you got Jake Paul boxing and stuff. So, and he's making what, 50 million, he said, off his last fight or something. Like, and that's funny. And that kind of goes to the social part of what you're talking about for like certifications and stuff. Like, if there's not the social certification, if people in the community aren't really paying attention and they're not buying, well, yeah, you can gauge it. And like, it's just kind of one of those things where people are just lying about their size and their scale. And so the long term, I think that's what's really important about it is when you're, like you were saying about the quality aspect, it sometimes takes a long time to get a really good idea down, especially when it comes to content. These things don't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
That's why we're still doing Frankenstein. That's why we're still doing,
For sure.
like Lord of the Rings, like all these properties and these IPs that have been around for so long are because there's integrity behind them. And people from a social perspective appreciate them. They love them. They cheer for them.
Until they get run into the ground.
Yeah, and that's and that's part of it too. And what you're talking about with balance and ads, well, it's a balance of content too. I think the storytelling and balancing out the type of stories that are being told is very important in the sense of how we move the industry forward as storytellers. And I think that the short form versus the long form, you can, like I said, you can have really good quality short form content. Like right now, I have a post that I shot and posted like back in December of last year, and it's like 650,000 plays or something like that, and like 22,000 likes. And don't get me wrong. That's cool. I love those impressions. I love those
Right.
those views and
But
the
are they driving
audience.
action?
Yeah, I mean, I've gained 2,000
There
followers
you
off
go.
the post.
And that's
Like,
something you know you can monetize. So it may not
yeah.
be the dollars, but you're finding something that is leading to a call to action.
But what's crazy is that the like little 15-second video that I did is like literally just a snippet of the full long form content. That's the full
So
set.
frustrating.
That yeah, so it's just like, okay, well, that set took a lot of time to prepare. It took a lot of time to shoot. It took a lot of time to edit. And so like we, going back and forth as a producer and as somebody that takes client input as well as audience input and everything else, I have to be considerate about my time on how much I'm putting into that as well, in the sense of it's easier to shoot it and create it in the long form if you've planned well. Short form usually needs to be something that's already been produced, shoot, and then you want to advertise it and run that as part of the campaign as
Yeah.
a bigger spectrum of that project. And so, like from a creative standpoint, you have to know that going into that.
For
You
sure.
have to know that
And
your
you need to have a
clients are
plan
going
what
to
you're
use
going to
it.
do with it,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter what you're intending to do with it if you don't know what your goal is at the end, right? I've seen a lot of people who will go out and they're going to shoot a 30-minute video and just put it out. Why? Break it into 4-minute clips, 3-minute clips, 90-second clips that are thematic and based on it, and then post those with the right hashtags or keywords to get people's attention. But again, that is because finally people are starting to read and understand this data revolution. They're starting to understand the demographics that go into it. Now, I tell people this all the time. If you know how advanced we gotten, the difference between me looking at a Nielsen radio survey of 800 people in a city of 7 million and my Google Analytics radio sample size that has 1 million people, which one do you think is more accurate? And you don't have to be a doctorate degree to understand that difference. 800 person sample size is entirely too small. However, on the other side of the spectrum, if you don't have a gut instinct of what works and what doesn't, all that data is worthless, because you can paint any picture you want to, right? We look at our Google Analytics, it says fast food. I'm not going to convince Taco Bell to advertise to 50-year-old white men for Taco Bell. It's just not going to happen. Even though every bit of data supports it, it's not going to happen. So that's where that gut instinct has to come in. And I think having the two of you here, that's what we're trying to say is you have to have that data and that analytics. You have to have that creativity to know this content is going to work. And if it's not going to work, screw these people for not watching it. I think it's going to be cool. If you can find that healthy medium, and that's why having people talking to each other in these departments is absolutely so important, because you as the content creator have your blinders on for what is good content. You from the monetization side are saying that is crap content. Here's what I need to make money. Well, if you split that down the middle, like most things in life, you probably have some good content. So it makes a ton of sense. How much does data, when you are, and I know this is something you and I talked about, but how much are you using the data to influence the content you make? And I think that's the next step in all this, right? The predictive AI. How are you using the data you have? And first of all, to make that happen, you need good inputs to get good outputs. You have to have good data previously. It can't be 67 people watch this on a Tuesday night while they were stoned out of their face. Like, we need real data here. So when you, how much is that coming into play, especially as you're launching Netfreak TV? How much are those analytics to looking towards the future coming into what you're creating now?
Well, I'm very blessed that I have really good corporate clients that have great structure in place, and they have, at least an understanding of what they're looking for. And so, like, I can help model that on our own side of, like, okay, I know that, like, what our demographic is. I know where we're going to go. So, like, all the data from basically what we've created with other people through live entertainment. Most of the time, our specialty is very much live entertainment.
Yep.
And so events, sports, comedy, especially concerts and festivals, I know what we want to do from the fact that, like, our stuff has worked to get us to continue to have those clients continue to hire us. And so they're hiring us for reasons because the stuff that we give them is the most engaged they've ever had. They show us the numbers. They show us that this is the most engaged photo that our CEO has ever had. Those kind of comments come back to me, and I'm like, okay, what did we do here? And then I translate that over into our own platform. And so it definitely takes a long time. And I think with what Netfreak TV is, it took a while for me to realize that this isn't just a story. It is a platform, and it's supposed to be built for other people, not necessarily for our own content, but it's supposed to be a mechanism for ways to, like, level the playing field in the industry. There is no mechanical royalties anymore. There is no, consistent income from streaming for artists specifically.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, I see that problem, I've identified it, and so now how as a platform, how as a company can we use our IP and use our talents that we have as production to build a platform to help other people do that as well?
To empower the artists, to empower the fans to watch when they want to watch it and stuff like that. And again, all well and good. Now let's talk about the monetization strategy, because you could say that, but for the artists get paid, that means you got to have the audience. And, one of the things that I've always found amusing, how long did Netflix say they weren't going to do ads? I mean, from up until the first drop in subscribers ever, they're like, uh-oh. And all of a sudden, within months, they've changed the entire scape of the industry and they're putting ads on everything. So, I've noticed the pay-to-play model diminishing over time, where everyone that said they weren't going to do it is all of a sudden doing it. And it's for a reason, right? The advertising ecosystem is so established and there's so many people looking to advertise. And honestly, it's so watered down with so many agencies looking for cuts that ultimately that is where to make the money. I mean, my audience, do you know how much more my audience is worth on an advertising basis than would have been on a subscriber basis? It's unbelievable. Now, if I charge people $20, could they pay? Yes. However, all of a sudden the words recession come and banks start crashing, and all of a sudden you're looking at your credit card bill, you're like, I don't even know what these subscriptions are. And then what do you cut? Right? As opposed to the ad model, you're more tolerant to ads. So Kevin, talk a little bit about that. Talk about what the adoption rate is like on the advertising side of the video. Are more people going to trying to monetize versus the paywalls and the gates and stuff like that? What are you seeing? Have you seen? I bet you've seen a lot of people have tried the paywall and failed miserably. What have you seen on your end?
Yeah, there's a mix, but ultimately, if anyone's kind of close to the ad tech industry and online content distribution, things like that, the fast channels, everyone's talking about them, right? So they're basically free ad supported platforms, and the increase in adoption rates of fast channels, it has it's
give an example of a fast channel that most people would know.
So basically, think of like Roku, right? So you're watching content on Roku, and instead of having no commercials, you're getting commercials every 20 minutes or something like that.
It's usually not the same sort of in-demand content. Like, you're not getting movies fresh out of the theater. You're not getting unique IP that is built for that, but you're getting content. That's out there.
You're getting content. You're getting and I think something that's kind of paramount to what we were talking about here today is that. DJ, your point about like Frankenstein, right? And kind of the classic content that everyone knows that people want to watch and consume. Well, think about when that content was created back in the day. Like there was one screen, right? Think of the screens.
There was one screen, and there were 3 film productions. There were 3 movie theaters. I mean, it was MGM was making that stuff. There was only 3 houses.
Yeah.
Now the fight over that intellectual property is insane. But go on.
And ultimately, the kind of with data and figuring out so. The data that's put into the content, what's called metadata, is key to helping tell the story, and key to understanding, how different users are consuming that content across multiple devices. That is very important to tell the stories around to the advertiser. Why you should be on these, the mobile device versus CTV, a fast channel that's not through on Roku. So ultimately, there's a, and DJ, in terms of like that kind of foundation of long form content and figuring out how to cut that up to distribute across these devices, that's where I geek out, because like being able to tell that story is incredibly important, and it's also a really important aspect to figure out how to increase the reach of your audience, right? So you get that loyal audience, but once you start funneling in the right data through the content and also through device data, that's how you can figure out, like, well, I know that this user likes sports, I know this user likes entertainment, but I also see that they like food, and they like wine,
and that we're talking lifestyle now, and I think that's one of the big advents is sports is part of lifestyle, right? Sports, grilling, all these things start going together, and you're building these cohorts. And I hate the word because it sounds like a dirty word, but you're creating cohorts of things that overlap, right? If you have somebody who loves watching college football, the propensity of them to be someone outside grilling and drinking a beer while they do so, you're pretty much 99% of the time you have the right person. And again, that's that simplification. So that's a good point to take a break. You listen to the Marketing Madmen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino, and I'm here with Kevin Webb and DJ Falk, and we are finishing up our conversation on video. So we didn't do this first because, you know, this is for everybody. Video has made its way. If you don't have a video content strategy for everything you do, you're probably going to be left out now. There are probably some heritage businesses that are going to look at this and be like, nah. But for most people, you need video as part of your strategy. So we tried to simplify this and not speak over people's head, but let's take some credit to these guys. So DJ, start with you. Talk about some of the cool ish that you've done that this career path has brought you to.
Oh man. So yeah, I guess just to kind of conclude the little mini story earlier, after I was leaving the studio, I founded my production company, and within 3-4 months, I had been picked up by Live Nation to do Music Midtown, and I learned a little bit of the history. I got to meet Alex Cooley. I found like I'd skipped school back in high school to go to Music Midtown when I was in the city, but like I didn't ever really expect to like come out the gate swinging like that with really good clients in a way that like it fit what I wanted to do. It matched my music industry background with Tree Sound and all the labels that we had worked with, and then it also kind of fit that event niche. And so from there we refined, and worked with a lot of tours, did a lot of content, and we tried to launch our website originally, and fell on our face due to bad booking agents taking advantage of us and stuff. And so that was one thing that I really want to emphasize for people that are creating content. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to scrap a project and move on to the next one, because it may mean a lot to you at the end of the day, and it may mean the best story in the world, but like if it's just not there and it's not time, then that's okay. And that's where I now thanks to the old plague, I was able to stop what we were doing with our corporate clients and go into the original content and the bigger scale. But along the way, man, I was lucky that we refined through really good clients.
And let's say, in addition, how important intellectual property and contracts are. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the worst things of the modern time. I mean, I loaded up Atomic Heart, a new video game, like when I have 8 minutes of free time, turn the game on, ready to go play, and I'm 20 minutes, I'm still reading disclaimers and having to go through and approve all this stuff. And they're like, hold down to get through it. And it's like, I'm still not listening to it. So you're just reading it. So you're saying, so the contracts are so long, they're written by lawyers whose job is to make it seem ambiguous and to screw one party out of it. So read your contracts, for the love of goodness. Read them. Understand intellectual property, because on the video side especially, if you botch that, all the work and time can be exploited by somebody else. So, and if you even have an inkling to hire somebody else, don't do it yourself. Don't do it yourself, or have somebody look it over. And then talk about Necker, because you got to throw that in there.
So I was definitely lucky that after Live Nation came SunTrust, when we were working with them, and SunTrust Park opened and got to work with the Braves and those guys. We worked with a lot of their stuff, and then that led into us kind of being the events guys in Atlanta. Everybody knew that our team was really good for events and captures, and so that led to me getting picked up by an incredible group of folks over at Premiere Live with the Necker Cup and the Necker Open, which is Richard Branson's island down in the British Virgin Islands, and this is their philanthropy event. And so we worked on that project the past few years, delivering their content.
And you're rubbing elbows with bajillionaires, and it's just a natural environment. And like, tell me if I'm getting this story wrong, but they hired somebody else. Your job was not to shoot photos, but they ended up asking for the rights to use all your photos that you were kind of casually shooting, right?
This past time that I was a guest, I came back as a guest through one of my friends that is the owner. Shout out to DJ Mihao. I got to go back as his guest, and so they just ended up. I had my camera. I'm always gonna have my camera with me. You know what I mean? Like I love photography, and I think that all this kind of goes back to like when I was growing up. I wanted to do wildlife photography, National Geographic. That was my thing. And so walking around on Necker Island, literally I have no shoes on. Like I'm just in the sand, playing with lemurs, taking photos of it. Like there are all these celebrities. There's all these people.
And you were just a regular person. And in my experience, most times when people smell genuine people, they all of a sudden change. Their guard comes down, and they become much more like, hey, remember when I used to be a normal person? Let's talk. So yeah, that's an awesome. And again, we can go on about those stories. Kev, what about you? So talk about where this has gotten you and some of the bigger clients and just the complexity of deals you're working with. Because again, probably not as sexy as playing with a lemur on the beach with Richard Branson, but equally important as to how to make things work and monetize. So talk about some of the clients you guys work with and just the scale that you've been able to achieve over the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a fun ride, right? Back to the technology that I was mentioning that I built in the past. I've had good luck where that technology has been acquired by companies like AOL, Yahoo, Microsoft, and at Frankly Media now. We service a ton of local broadcasters, 680 The Fan, but
the best client.
Fantastic client,
for both of you,
and also very very close, which is even more convenient. Pretty good seats once in a while too. But we also we're blessed with the fact that we're able to work with companies like Newsweek, who just had their 90th birthday, and helping them monetize, and they're great partners.
Give
And
us some scale. How many video views in a week for Newsweek? How many millions? I mean, you're talking massive scale here.
yeah, I mean 50 million plus users a month, right? And then
Goodness gracious.
in terms of viewership, yeah, we're talking well over 100 million video views a month, and so yeah, there's a ton of scale, and they continue to grow, and so that's what's fun is working with established brands like Newsweek, and also brands like back to the content creators. We're helping tons of new content creators bring their brands to life, and help them with their digital strategies, and watching someone grow from zero to something is it really not only puts money in my pocket, but
Right.
also it's fun. It's fun to see.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times the business model is set up on a profit share basis, right? So you share success. So
Right.
if that company's growing, you're getting a bigger cut. You're sharing those ad dollars, which makes it really like it's in everyone's interest, which doesn't always happen that way.
100%.
So that's important.
And it's more than just sharing. So oftentimes we're taking the risk on the technology, because there's been years of investment building the systems that we have in place, refining them. And,
Oh, the bandwidth, just the data bandwidth. I mean, that's half the times you're paying more money for
Right.
the data bandwidth at that size. How much I mean, it's insane the bandwidth that's going back there, especially
Yeah.
on video. I think we used like, I don't even know, hundreds of terabytes of data on streaming radio. Could you imagine on 50 million videos how much data storage and how much is involved?
Right. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. So it's really, at the end of the day, what we like to say is that we let the content creators do what they do best. They create premium content, and we help them with their digital strategy to figure out how to monetize it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and there's a lot of pieces that go into that, right? And that's another thing. It cannot be your only basis of your digital strategy to have video. Like your social media outreach, event marketing. I mean, video and events play themselves very well, because maybe you have all this live content, but let's do a live version of this. And then all of a sudden we're doing it live and we're throwing concerts. I think that's one of the things that we've grown at 6A The Fan the most is, from being a radio company to being a TV production studio and an event producer. Now all of a sudden we're in the NIL space. And who do you think a Georgia athlete's going to work with? Some schmuck agent, or the guys who eventually, when their career fizzles out, they're going to probably come want to work for us. So we have those incentives. So I think it's all about bridging those connections. We got 60 seconds left. I'm signing off. I'm turning this over to you guys. One tip to give each person, one creating video and one trying to monetize it. Go.
yeah, I think well, I'll touch quickly on content. I think it's been said a couple of times here today. Believe in what you're doing, because you'll stick to it. You'll create the premium content, and then as far as monetizing, sometimes less is more, and so delivering a premium experience with premium content, that's how you're going to win.
Oh, man. And so my tip, my one tip, it would be find a problem every day that you enjoy solving and solve it. Find a way that the story, whether it's the story needs to be told better, whether it's a better way to shoot a shot, whether it's a better way to record a message, whatever it is, find a problem and solve it, and you'll be happy.
Yeah, I love that. I think every day, and that's what it's about, right? So hopefully we've solved some problems for you that you didn't know you had, maybe even. And you were listening to the Marketing Madmen. Tune in every week, Saturday, 3 p.m. to hear the shows. Check us out. Google us, look us up, find us on podcast providers. Thank you very much.